Okay. I think I lost the feed there. I don't know what was the disconnect actually. Okay. Um, Rosemary. Okay. All right. Did I miss much in the feed there? You can send me a real quick text. I kind of leave off where I was last at. So I believe where I last left off, and Rosemary, correct me if I'm wrong, basically we're looking at a client and customer base that is massive. Okay, perfect. Okay, so basically we are basically what we're looking at right now is a client and customer base that is it's a massive one at that. This isn't just for addressing what would be concerned a feel good message, because we're not promoting a feel good message to be nice to a certain category of people. This is a real category of people, and this particular category of people is actually so large. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. It's kind of like if you buy a Lexus, all of a sudden you go out and you're driving and you notice all these Lexuses on the road. Lexuses probably is the pluralization of Lexus. Sounds like a Nemesis thing. With Lexus, you notice all these things when you finally engage it. So when you start knowing a blind person in your life, you kind of start to see more blind people around you, whereas you didn't really notice or didn't really add up to it and everything. There are not a lot of visually impaired people that you tend to see in your day-to-day, because you do certain activities that are different from them. So it doesn't really mean that they're not active or anything like that. It just means that they do different things. Now, the online world, we are much more synonymous with a whole bunch of things. You never really know that you're interacting with somebody that's visually impaired or completely blind or cognitive print disabled person. These people are very active. We have a lot of purchase power. We have a lot of say in things. There's a lot going on as far as when we talk about a person that is involved in society as opposed to what you don't see in society. So it's a very closed off, opinionated world, and that's kind of like I could summarize this in saying that Facebook really doesn't describe life accurately, even though there is so much going on Facebook and everything. People have many facades and they have different ways of explaining things. Well, this is a way to come to a real stance about when it comes to blind, visually, cognitive, print disabled people. It's a way to reach out and say, we're an actual real group of people. Yes, blind people exist. And with the blind people in the world, you don't have to be blind to know that we actually hold a lot of skills, hold a lot of capability, because we have to figure out how to do things, and usually it's 10 times harder. So we have to be 10 times more creative than somebody that has a verbal sense, okay? We have to really use our head and use every capability that we have at our fingertips in order to do something. So this is just to emphasize that our interactivity level is not limited. Technology is never the problem. People are the problem. Now, when we say people are the problem, this is called a misunderstanding. It's called communication hang-ups, where it's just we're viewed as a certain way. And when we are looking at interactivity, when we want to, say, promote website accessibility or program accessibility of the like, we have to start this dialogue and say, okay, I'm a blind person, I can use a computer. And they go, wow, that's fascinating. And then you're going, okay, so where do we go from here? And say, well, how do you use a computer? And say, well, I use a piece of technology that allows me to work on the computer. It talks to me and it just reads text on the screen. There's all kinds of many facets about it and around it. And then they go, okay, so how does this thing interact with a web page? And then a whole new dialogue spots in. Okay. A lot of this information right here is feel-good information for the clients that we work with, okay? They don't really need to know all that information, but it does help in building trust and building business etiquette and all those things. It's kind of different because if you go to, say you're redoing your house, okay, and you hire somebody to come in and say, do your floor on the house and everything. Yeah, you pick out the color and the material and all that, and say, I like this room like this room like this room like this, okay? But you don't really need to know the ins and outs of how does he lay the glue down the ground, how does he stick the wood, the blah, blah, blah. And see, but this is the thing that occurs, is that when working with clients, we are hitting this annoying area where they want to know all the ins and outs because either A, they're curious, and that's fine, but B, they're trying to convince somebody else that this is a justified thing. The process isn't a justified thing in how we lay down the floors and how to paint the walls and all that stuff. You know, a customer doesn't need to know all that. They just want what they want. So the approach in this whole emphasis is just to outline that whenever we come into a situation, everything, we rather just do our job and not explain to you everything under the sun how we do our job. That's not how accessibility should be approached or usability should be approached. It should be the electrician's job to be an electrician. It should be the janitor's job to be a janitor. It should be the carpenter's job to be a carpenter. So you don't need to know everything about wood to get the job done. So in essence here, what we'd like to focus on is actually limiting this first-time interaction with clients and customers where we can help with accessibility needs. The concern is not that we're going to get the job done credibly, although that is a major factor in when you approach a company, okay? If you approach somebody that is spot on and really good at what they do, okay? They don't need to sit there and brag all day to you about how good they are, okay? They just are. You can do the research and credible sources of where we are. The clients that we're dealing with right now are, these are Fortune 500s. They are companies that are very well known out in the world, auto manufacturers. They are high profile industries, commercial basis, and we've worked with everything from the lowest to the greatest. We work with programs as well, such as Intuit, in making QuickBooks accessible, and we've been doing so for quite some time now. So credibility is not really the thing that we need to sit there and talk about either, but the sources say enough. The thing that we would like to start moving into, because just as any civil rights movement or equal opportunity movement is concerned, this is not a standpoint where blind people need to sit there and say, hey, consider me now, and feel as though they need to be fighting on the stance or on the boundaries of we have to be considered. It's an entitlement issue at this point because there's a mentality out there among people with cognitive print disabilities, visual impairments, blindness, a related thing, that we have a sense of entitlement, and therefore it's annoying to listen to that kind of client base. the perspective is actually very slanted, and it's a slippery road to get involved in that. What we would like to redirect a little bit more towards is when looking at a client base, it's not the concern of how they do the job. It's not the concern of the quality of the job right now. It's not a sense of whether it should or should not be done. It's actually, there are laws in place now that state, yeah, you have to have blind accessibility in place. And this covers visual impairment, cognitive, print disabilities, 508 compliance standards, WCAG, and you're basically going after all these things that state that something has to be accessible. Oh, hello. So basically, at this juncture right here, we would like to outline that when looking at accessibility, you want to get into the main factors of how do we approach accessibility, okay? Because there are many facets of it, okay? Not every system is the same, and this isn't like we're going into a house doing some kind of general task, although we have outlined a really simplified process. Okay, accessibility is a wide span field. This isn't where we're remodeling a house. We have to know way more than the average person. We have to know the ins and outs of everything. And when working with a company and approaching them first off, there's like a 6 month to a year dialogue on how we go and do that so they can feel confident we don't go in and mess things up, because it does happen. So the trust assurance and the confidence factor of what we're doing here, we're trying to limit that amount of time, that six month to a year gap, on being able to have a company understand, because it's very frustrating for the client, it's very frustrating for us, because there's a gap of miscommunication, the stereotypes, and all these things laid out. So we're changing the standard on how it's actually approached, because this is not, like I said, it's not a matter anymore of entitlement. It's not a matter of it needs to be forced. This is a matter of teamwork. What's going to work? Teamwork. So we have to lay it down and just be open on the ins and outs and how we actually approach working for a company, whether it be a website or program accessibility, or making a process of any type or any kind of physical limitations that could encompass anybody that's working with any of these disabilities to have an easier time with things. Like I said, the problem is not technology. We can do anything with technology these days. You can make technology order your pizza. In fact, I probably should order one right now while I'm talking on this feed. And I can do that because I'm blind, and I'm not limited by anything. I can do anything on this device. Okay, technology is not the problem. People are miscommunicated as to what the issue is. We want to show that it's not such a nervous task to come to the table and start talking about accessibility. A lot of the things here, because we all in the technology sector try to analytically and just logically describe out something that is actually of an emotional capacity here. When we are looking at this kind of thing, we could stick a funnel in the back of your throat and tamp down as much information as possible, but it doesn't get the point across because we're not really empathizing with the fact that these people have trust issues, and the world's enough as it is, the world's got problems, and we're just working to